I did.
All right. No one else is coming, or they send out a message? What's the next thing on the schedule? Just
This
saying.
last time.
I'm saying, but what do you have? Mincha, Marav?
Theoretical Marv at the Chorba.
Right,
At
what
7:30
time?
though.
No, don't, I'm not going until 7:30.
7, I think doors
Doors
open at
open at
7:15
Uh-huh.
and starts 7:45.
Is it the Chorba?
Yeah.
So I'm leaving with 45.
Yes, I get there early, get seats.
7 doors open 7:10, begins 7:30. Come early to get a seat.
Yes, that is for sure. Okay, we'll begin. Here's some sheets. You guys want to take? Just one sheet each. Anybody here Shana Bet? Okay, so I don't remember what I speak about every year, so I don't think I said this last year, so even if I did, I'm not sure if you all were there. Tiny was there, he had to come, that's his uncle. You know. But, okay, there are many reasons to celebrate Yom Haatzmaut. No doubt about it, there are very good reasons, and reasons that I'm sure you've heard a lot about, probably today, the last few days. Number one, the fact that we are sovereign in our land after 2,000 years of exile is pretty amazing. Something that we take for granted because we were all born into a world where there's a state of Israel and Jewish people have a homeland, a thriving country, like that's normal, right? Well, just remember that your grandparents, probably, weren't born into such a world, and certainly your great-grandparents, okay? It is something that we really can't take for granted. But on the other hand, it is something that's very significant. Look at the first source on the page. Amar Shmuel, the famous Gemara, paskin like by the Rambam, as you see at the very end of the line. It says where in the Rambam he paskins this. Amar Shmuel ein bein ha'olam hazeh li'imot HaMashiach ela shibud malchiot bilvad. The main difference between this world and the days of Mashiach, by the way, everyone makes this mistake. People think Yemot HaMashiach is part of Olam Haba. Everyone thinks it's Olam Hazeh, it's Olam Haba. Olam Haba, you know, when Mashiach comes, there'll be an Olam Haba. Wrong. Yemot HaMashiach is in this world. Is part of this world. It's still going to be normal. We're still going to have, we're still going to have desires. We're still going to have to go out and make a living. A lot of the things that we're used to are going to be normal. The only main difference is we will no longer be subjugated to the nations of the world. That's Shibud Malchiot. And lo and behold, we are no longer subjugated to the nations of the world. I'm not saying that things are perfect and that we could tell the world where we think they should go. We know that that's not the case, but we also do know that it's getting a lot better. There are things that the current government has done ever since the beginning of the war, which are unheard of in previous generations, previous governments. Never would they have done anything against the United States. I mean, what Bibi did with Biden was, I'm not listening to you. I don't care. You're telling us we shouldn't go in. We're going in, etc. So we do certainly have some level of Shibud Malchiot. That is certainly something that warrants celebration. Now, by the way, I'm not getting into the whole. I heard it from the window, from the door, a little bit of the shir, the previous year. I'm not getting into the halachic discussion of how to celebrate with challah, with a bracha, without a bracha. That's not the question. The question is Yom Haatzmaut a day where we should be joyous? Is it really a joyous day? Is there really something significant that has happened that we should really be celebrating? And I know, especially for chutznikim, as we all are, it's a little strange when we come to Eretz Yisrael for the first time, and we spend a year here, and they do things that are a little bit strange, right? The whole Yom Haatzmaut thing some things are weird. because you're not used to it, unless you happen to have gone to a school where they did the whole tefillah with the blowing of the shofar and everything. But, a lot of schools don't do that. And it seems like strange. So it's something like, oh, come on, this is not, there's something wrong with this. Right? Everyone has a problem with the fact that they sing parts of L'chadodi, during the, you'll see it soon in the Chorva. They're not singing it because they think it's Shabbos. They're thinking it because if you really read the words of the Chadodi, it's all about Geula. It's all about, Hitorri, Kiva Orech, Kumi Ori. I mean, it's all about the light, the redemption. Anyway, so that's why I want to point out these things that are, it's not a joke. I have a whole shiur that I'm not giving it tonight, but a whole shiur called, Celebrating Yom Haatzmaut, No Laughing Matter. Don't make fun, because there are some serious sources that are on our side, as you heard in the last year, that we really should be making a new holiday. Anyway, so one of the reasons is certainly the fact that there's sovereignty. Another reason is to celebrate the beginning of the ultimate redemption with the fulfillment of so many signs of the Geula, and so many prophecies are being fulfilled. And again, I heard in the last shiur that he elaborated a little bit on that. This is certainly one of the reasons why we should be celebrating. But who are we to determine that the signs of Geula are coming to fruition? Like, there's a lot written on this. There's Dapim in Gemara. There's a lot of Kabbalistic works about the coming of Mashiach. There's, of course, tons of Svarim in the Nevi'im and the Ketuvim that talk about it. And so how are we to determine that this is really the beginning of the redemption? So there's a quote from Rav Aryeh Kaplan. Anyone know who Rav Aryeh Kaplan is? I'm sure here. This is the English library, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you have a bunch of his books here somewhere, right? Rav Aryeh Kaplan was a prolific writer who, over the course of 12 years, all he wrote was 12 years. He died, unfortunately, very young, 48. And he was only sort of like discovered by Pinchas Stolper when he was 36. So 12 years he wrote, and he wrote 66 books, which is mind-boggling. How a human being could do it. He was a super genius. You could call it Torah Kula, anybody, just open up any of his books and look at the footnotes, and you'll see that he's not quoting just, Gemaras that we can all learn. He's quoting stuff that is, beyond normal, regular people knowing. So anyway, he writes in a book called The Real Messiah. It's a little pamphlet. Came out with a bunch of pamphlets for the NCSY. Now it's in a compilation of the anthology of Rav Aryeh Kaplan. The Real Messiah was basically a book about refuting Christian missionaries and showing how all their proofs are garbage. But at the end of the book, he has a chapter called The Real Messiah, where he basically says, if everything that I just proved to you is true, and that that guy, Yashka, is not the real Messiah, so who is the real Messiah? What is the real Messiah going to be like? And he paints a picture, a whole scenario of how, in our day and age, Mashiach could come. He points to the fact that what he calls the Industrial Revolution, he makes a beautiful point. I don't think I have it here. Yeah. He says, if you would take somebody from 2,000 years ago and bring him to 200 years ago, he would find a world not much different than what he left. Because not much changed from 2,000 years ago to 200 years ago. But if you would take somebody from 200 years ago and put him in today's world, he would find a world beyond his wildest imagination. And Rav Aryeh Kaplan was saying that in the late 1970s, because unfortunately he died in 1980. So he was saying then the world is so, crazy, more advanced than it was 200 years ago. Can you imagine what he would say today? I would say the same thing, by the way. Take somebody from then. I mean, I was alive then, right, in the 1970s. That's when I was a kid. And it's because we're going through life and things develop slowly, they came out with a new thing. Okay, it's called computers, personal computers, internet, and so it's like slow, so you sort of get used to it. But if you would just take me from 1970 and bring me here, I wouldn't believe that this is possible. So even, more than just 200 years ago to today, it would be even from 50 years ago to today. The differences are unbelievable. And he said it's all been foreseen by the Zohar and other sources that there's going to be an opening of the floodgates of knowledge. So he talks about that, and he talks about a lot of the various different things that are going on. But the main ingredient, he says, is the fact that we are in control of our land once again. And then he writes this, what I have here on the sheet, the second source. If one looks with an unprejudiced eye at the world today, and that's a very important word, unprejudiced, because you have a lot of people who are looking at the same things that we're looking at, and they're just not seeing it. How are they not seeing it? Because they're prejudiced. Because they've come with a preconceived notion that this can't possibly be Geula. Why can't it be Geula? Because it was done by secular Jews. Because the secular Jews are the ones who initiated the Zionist movement and the state of Israel. This can't possibly be it. So therefore, even when things smack them in the face as clearly Geula, they will just keep on denying it. There's a beautiful word. This I probably did say last year. The Nazir of Yerushalayim, who was Rav Kook's, one of Rav Kook's greatest students, Rav David HaKohen. So he pointed out, we say every day in davening 3 times, "V'techazena ineinu b'shuvcha l'tzion barachamim." So how would you translate that? We say, Hashem, please let our eyes one day see when you come back to Zion. Let us be zocha to be here when the Geula happens. But Rav David HaKohen said, the Geula is clearly already happening. There's no question the Geula is happening. How come? Because we have a concept of Imo Anochi B'tzara. Hashem is with us in our time of trouble, which means that Hashem goes to Galut with us. If we go down to Galut, Hashem, Kivyachol, whatever that means, the Shekhinah goes with us to protect us. So says Rav the Nazir, he says, well, then therefore it just makes sense that if Jews are coming back, that means Hashem's not staying in Galut when half the Jewish people already are back in Eretz Yisrael. That means the Shekhinah is also coming back. That means we are seeing B'shuvcha l'tzion barachamim. We are seeing Hashem's return to Tzion. So what is our prayer about nowadays? Why do we continue saying V'techazena inenu? We are seeing it. So why are we asking to see it when we're already seeing it? The answer is because we ask Hashem, let us not be blinded by all the problems and all the things that make us think that this might not be Geula. Let our eyes see what they're actually seeing and recognize it for what it is. And that's a big challenge because, again, as I said, a lot of people don't see it. And that's why Rav Aryeh Kaplan says, if you look with an unprejudiced eye at the world today, he will see that we are living in an age where almost all the Jewish prophecies regarding the prelude to the Messianic age are coming to pass. I don't know all the prophecies of the Messianic age, but Rav Aryeh Kaplan certainly did. And he's saying we are seeing almost all of those prophecies coming to pass. Living on the threshold of the Messianic age as we do should be a most exciting experience for any Jew. Other generations, listen to this, other generations have expected the Messiah's imminent appearance based on the forced interpretation of 1 or 2 prophecies, whereas we are living through the entire range of Messianic tradition, often coming to pass with uncanny literalness. And that's another very important point. It's not, you don't need pilpul to figure out that we're living in the Geula process. You just need to open your eyes. Just see it outside your window. I moved to Beit Shemesh 28 years ago. Made Aliyah about 35 years ago, whatever. We bought a place in Beit Shemesh. And I'm sure you guys have been to Beit Shemesh for Shabbos or Ramat Beit Shemesh for Shabbos, right? So I remember like a year after I made Aliyah, a good friend of mine came on what was supposed to be a pilot trip to check out options of possibly making Aliyah. Unfortunately, he still lives in Haatzmaut. He actually, I just heard he bought a place at least, finally bought a place here in Israel, but okay. He came, and I remember him taking me to an overlook in where I live, which is called Givat Sharet. It's the hill, called Givah, the hill. There's old Beit Shemesh, old Beit Shemesh, that was in the 1950s, was established. Then there was the newer part, which was where I was living. And then he pointed to the mountains and he said, I heard they're going to be building a lot of apartments up there. That's what the people were telling him because he was looking for a place to live, right? That's called Ramat Beit Shemesh. If you've been at Ramat Beit Shemesh, there's now Ramat Beit Shemesh, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zion. I don't know what they're up to. They're already giving it different names. It is humongous. There are hundreds of thousands of what's called Yechidot Diur, right? Apartments or houses. And who knows how many Jews have come. Most of them are American Jews or diaspora Jews coming back to Eretz Yisrael. So I look out my window and I see Geula. That is Geula. That is the essence of Geula. The Jewish people returning to Eretz Yisrael, that is Geula. There's like nothing else you can call it. So we are living in very special times. That's what he's saying. Uncanny literalness. You don't have to know a lot. You don't have to know all the different prophecies. You just have to open your eyes and know basics. Like the Jewish people, like what's Geula? The land of Israel is going to become rejuvenated after 2,000 years of desolation. That's a clear sign, the Gemara says, in Tzadichet of Sanhedrin. And the Jewish people are going to return. And by the way, it also talks about a terrible tragedy, or it doesn't say the word Holocaust, of course, that's going to happen right before the Geula. And there are numerous statements like that. And all these things have come true. And forget about the wars. Do you know that the concept of Itchal to the Geula, which everyone throws around, Itchal to the Geula, Reshit Tzmichat Geulatenu, right? Do you know that it only appears once in Shas? So you know what it's about? Gemara says in Megillah, Daf Yud Zayin or Yud Chet, Gemara says, Milchama Itchal to the Geula. War is the beginning of redemption. So much so that the Chatam Sofer, I didn't see this myself inside, but I've heard Rav Shachter say it many times, that so much so is Milchama, the beginning of redemption, that one is not allowed to pray for a war to end. You could pray that no one should get hurt, that Jews should be safe. But that a war should end, that's why, now there's a ceasefire. It's like, some people are, thank God, you don't have to run into the bomb shelters anymore. But on the other hand, I'm like, darn, we were getting so close. We were destroying our enemies. We want to go further because it's bringing us that much closer to the final Geula. That is Itchal to the Geula. And I mean, what is one of the surest things in the state of Israel? There's going to be a war. We're going to have a war at some point every few years. It's going to be a lull, and then there's going to be another war, because this is all, as Rav Shachter has said also many times, ever since 1948, this is all one long war. It's not separate wars. It's one long war. It's the Milchemet Gog uMagog, clearly, because that's what the war is about. The war is over Jerusalem. What did the Arabs call the October 7th? The Al-Aqsa flood. It was all about Al-Aqsa. You know what that is, right outside your window. Right? It's about Har HaBayit. That's what the war is all about. That's the war of Gog uMagog. So that's what we're living through, and you don't have to be, as I say, a PhD in Tanakh to understand that we're living in Geula. Anyway, okay, I'll stop there with the other reasons why one should celebrate, because I really want to focus on something which is might be a little surprising, and that is what I call Simcha Shel Mitzvah. Because if you really think about it, when we rejoice in Judaism, it's always about a mitzvah. Every meal or special day that we have has something to do with a mitzvah. For example, a brit milah, it's a mitzvah. A wedding is a mitzvah. Holidays, v'samachta b'chagecha, a bar mitzvah, right, is about the fact that he's starting to do mitzvah. We don't have in Judaism anything called like a sweet 16. Like that's just total shtiyot. There's nothing significant about being 16, but there is something significant about being 13 or 12 for a girl, right? Because now they're chayiv in mitzvot, so you make a suda, right? That's what our joy is all about, is about mitzvot. And therefore, I believe that that's the main reason we should be joyous on Yom Haatzmaut, because of a Simcha Shel Mitzvah. What do I mean, Simcha Shel Mitzvah? I mean as follows. The ability to fulfill a mitzvah that has been out of reach for close to 2,000 years, and not just a plain old stam mitzvah. Like I think that we would all, if we were living, and I'm sure you hear all these stories about the Middle Ages. It wasn't so simple to get a lulav and esrog, right? It was a big, big deal. So I am sure many communities probably went years without taking a lulav and esrog because they just couldn't get one. Can you imagine if years would go by and you finally got a lulav and esrog, right? It would be the most joyous sukkahs of them all, because they finally were able to do this mitzvah which we couldn't do. I remember, it's probably about 18 years ago. I don't remember the exact date. If you guys wouldn't remember because I think you were too young. There's something called birchat hachama, right? It's a special bracha. It's actually not such a special bracha. It takes 2 seconds. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam oseh maaseh bereshit. Every 28 years, the sun returns to the same place where it was at the beginning of creation. It's a Gemara in Brachos. So it says you have to make the special bracha once every 28 years. I remember doing it in high school, and then I did it my second time, I don't know, when I was in my 40s. And it's coming up. It'll be in the next couple of years. You'll experience it also. So why am I telling you this? Because I remember the first time I did it, obviously in high school, I didn't really care so much, and it wasn't such a big deal. I remember being, in the schoolyard. They said, everybody come outside and say this bracha, and that's it. But I remember the second time when I was finally adult and I cared about Torah and mitzvot, I came out and I was so excited to do this mitzvah. It comes up only once every 28 years. Mitzvah, it's not even it's hard to say it's a mitzvah, it's a halacha. All right? It's a halacha brought down that we say this bracha once every 28 years. I went to the store the night before. I bought a special shirt, a special tie, so I could make a shechiyanu when I was doing because you don't make a shechiyanu on this. It's a bracha. It's not one of those mitzvot. But I wanted to dafka make a shechiyanu. I was so happy. Can you imagine now taking a mitzvah that's not just lulav and esrog, which I'm not belittling, of course, but a mitzvah that is equal to all the rest. There are only 7 mitzvot that Chazal say are equal to all the rest. One of them is Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. The source is right in front of you. You have the English one, right? Your sources are English. I have 2 versions of it, and I forget which one I have there. Anyway, no, it's not there. It's here. Yes, the Sifrei, the 4th source on the page. The first English. No, not true. Rabbi Kaplan is the first English one. The one after Megillah. Okay, you see it. Once Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, Rabbi Mati ben Harash ben Chanina, son of the brother of Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Yodantan, basically 4 Tanaim, were leaving the land. They reached Paltum, which is somewhere in Chutz La'aretz, and they remembered Eretz Yisrael. They lifted their eyes. Their tears began to flow. They tore their garments, and they read this verse: "You shall drive them out, the goyim, and dwell in their land." Right? V'yarashtem otam v'yashavta ba'artzam. Then they returned to their place. They made an about face, and they went back to Eretz Yisrael, and they said, dwelling in Eretz Yisrael is equal to all the mitzvot of the Torah. Here, by the way, in this story, it doesn't say why they left. There's a parallel story, the exact same story, repeated right afterwards, with just a few other players, I think 3 Tanaim, and there it says they were on their way to learn Torah by one of the greats who was in Chutz La'aretz. And they still made an about face, and they still went back to Eretz Yisrael saying, living in Eretz Yisrael is equal to all the mitzvot in the Torah. So now we have an opportunity to keep a mitzvah that's equal to all the mitzvot in the Torah that we couldn't do for close to 2,000 years, and that's why we should be happy. Now, it's funny because I just gave this year, I remember, in a different yeshiva, okay, it doesn't matter. And a guy asked me a question, and honestly, I was pretty shocked that he asked me it, because it just shows, I don't know. You'll see what I tell you. He said, I understand there were always Jews living in Eretz Yisrael throughout the generations. it's not like this mitzvah was impossible to keep. I said, are you serious? Like, do you know any history? Like, I didn't say it like that. I was very nice to him. I'm telling you guys, are you serious? I mean, there were maybe a handful of people. All I know is I know one statistic, that in 1917, which was the Balfour Declaration, okay, which is at least close to 40 years after the beginning of the return, like the first Aliyah, the second Aliyah, that all started in 1882, right? So in 1917, after a few waves of Aliyah, there were 56,000 Jews living in Eretz Yisrael. That means let's go back to 1880. There was probably about maybe 20,000 Jews living in Eretz Yisrael. It was less than 0.5% of all of world Jewry. Okay? Then, by 1948, there was already 600,000 Jews living in Eretz Yisrael. By 1967, the Six-Day War, there were 2.5 million. Today, every year at Yom Haatzmaut, they give out the new statistics. So there are around 7.2 million Jews. There's 10 million inhabitants, but about 7.2 million Jews living in Eretz Yisrael. That is only possible for one reason, because of the state of Israel. You could say whatever you want, you can give a lot of criticism to the state of Israel, but one thing you can't say, you can't deny, and that is that it facilitated the return of Am Yisrael to Eretz Yisrael. And without it, Jews, yes, a handful of Jews were able to make the arduous journey and live here on handouts. Those Jews who did live here throughout the generations were all living on handouts from Chutz La'aretz. There would be a pushka that would give around in all the different communities, and they would send money to those few good Jews who were living in Eretz Yisrael. There was no economy. There was no possibility of really living here en masse. Now we have it, and it's only because of the state of Israel. So that is the reason we should be happy. The ability to keep a mitzvah that is equal to all the mitzvah of the Torah. But it goes further. I just want to say one more thing before I go to the next point, and that is two more quotes. Number one, Rav Yaakov Emden, right? The Yavetz. Rav Yaakov Emden writes, has a long introduction. I have the whole thing translated here in my book, A Drop in the Ocean, which I'll go through and I'll tell you what these books are. But anyway, I have the whole thing. It's the last source in the book. He just went on a tirade about the importance of living there. He's living in the 1700s in Germany, and he's saying we all have to go back to Eretz Yisrael. Like, what the heck is he talking about? Like, it was barely possible. He still said every Jew has to do everything in their power to go back to Eretz Yisrael. So in that whole very, very long piece, he has one line that says, Eretz Yisrael is the peg upon which the entire Torah hangs. The peg upon which the entire Torah hangs. That's pretty chashuv. And one more story. You know Rav Asher Weiss, I'm sure. Okay? So I have a student who went to Bar Ilan after his year in Israel, 2 years in Israel, 2 years in yeshiva, and he got different speakers to come and speak to the guys and girls there in Bar Ilan, and he got Rav Asher Weiss. I don't know how he did that, but anyway, he got Rav Asher Weiss to come and speak to them. Rav Asher Weiss came in and started his shir like this. I have a recording of it. Tonight we are going to speak about the most important mitzvah in the Torah. Not one of the most important. The most important mitzvah in the Torah. And he gave a shir about Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. So, we're talking about serious stuff. Living in Eretz Yisrael is one of the most important, at least, mitzvah in the Torah. And we have an opportunity to do it, but there's something much more, much deeper. Why it's a Simcha Shel mitzvah? Because, first of all, you all know that this is the only place where you can keep all the mitzvot. There are so many mitzvot which cannot be kept anywhere outside of Eretz Yisrael. Look actually on the second side, the third to last source, it's sort of like in the middle of the page. Eretz Yisrael Nachalat Am Yisrael, you see that? Rav Cheskel Abramsky, the Chashuv Rav, who was Rav most of his life in England. in London, and then he came on Aliyah, and he wrote a whole perush on the Tosefta, and he writes this. He has a small booklet called Eretz Yisrael, Nachalat Am Yisrael. And he writes, of the 613 mitzvot, approximately 195 of them apply only in Eretz Yisrael and cannot possibly be fulfilled anywhere else. And then the fulfillment of another 78 of them actually depends on the land. It's not just they can't be fulfilled, it actually depends on the land. And even in the land itself, there are those whose fulfillment, it requires special conditions, of course. I mean, we can't keep all the mitzvot today because we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, obviously. Even here in Eretz Yisrael. There are a few other mitzvot that, although they apply everywhere, their main fulfillment is in the land. And I like this line best. Of the 248 positive commandments, only around 90 of them can be fulfilled everywhere. Of 248. So you're living in Eretz Yisrael, you can fulfill so many more mitzvot. So it's not just etzem ha'uvda that you're fulfilling a mitzvah that's equal to all the rest. You're also able to fulfill so many more mitzvot. All the agricultural mitzvot that we even can do today. Maybe they're derabanan today, but we still do them, and they don't do them in Chutz La'aretz. But there's something much, much stronger, and that is that every single mitzvah that a Jew does in Eretz Yisrael is on a much higher level than the same exact mitzvah, and I'm even talking about mitzvah that have nothing to do with agriculture, nothing to do with the land. What's called Chovot Haguf, Shabbos, Yamim Tovim, Tefillin, Tzitzis. All those mitzvot are greater in Eretz Yisrael. Where do I get that from? Go back to the first side of the sheet. The Sifrei, right? Fourth source on the page. No, sorry, I did that already. The next Sifrei, the fifth source. Another explanation, you shall quickly perish, right? This is talking about what we say twice a day in Vayayim Shamoah. It says, V'haraf Hashem b'chem. If you do avodah zarah, Hashem will get angry. And eventually, Va'avadetem meira me'al ha'aretz ha'tovah. You will be kicked out of the land. Hashem will kick you out of the land. And then what does it say right after that? You'll be kicked out of the land. And then it says, put these words upon your arms and upon your heads, totafot on your heads, put them on your mezuzot, on your doorposts, and teach them to your children. So the Midrash is clearly bothered by the seeming disconnect between the different parts. You're going to do avodah zarah, I'm going to kick you out of the land. Oh, by the way, put on tefillin, put up mezuzot, learn Torah. What's the connection? Says the Midrash, you shall quickly perish, even though I, God, exile you from the land to Chutz La'aretz, be distinguishable, sorry about that, through the mitzvot. I still want you to be, in Hebrew it's called mitzuyanim, distinguishable through the mitzvot. In other words, I still want you to look and act like Jews, even in Chutz La'aretz. But why? Why does Hashem say, I want you to keep mitzvot even though I'm sending you into exile? So that they will not be new to you when you return. The only reason we do mitzvot in Chutz La'aretz is so that we shouldn't forget how to do mitzvot where they're supposed to be kept, which is Eretz Yisrael. I have an entire chapter in this book, A Drop in the Ocean, chapter 5, all about bringing 30 sources amongst Midrashim, Psukim and Tanakh. Actually, I have a few of the Psukim here. Psukim, Rishonim, Achronim, who all accept this Midrash as I don't want to say halacha, because there's no real nafkamina. Meaning, you still have to keep mitzvah in Chutz La'aretz. And not only, as the Midrash says, as practice, but it's mandatory practice. It's not derabanan, it's d'oraisa. This is the interpretation of the pasuk, as Hashem is saying, even though I'm going to kick you out of the land, I still expect you to keep mitzvot. But then the Midrash reveals to us why Hashem expects us to keep mitzvot in Chutz La'aretz. L'chora, what does Chutz La'aretz have to do with mitzvot? Mitzvot are meant to be kept in Eretz Yisrael. What is it for? So you won't forget. But it's mandatory. Mandatory practice. It's like a guy who's on a basketball team, and he knows he's the best player on the team, and he says to his coach, listen, I'll be there at the games. Don't bother me with practice. I don't need to come to practice. I'm good enough. I am sure you all understand that the coach will throw him off the team. I don't care how good he is. He will not be on the team if he doesn't practice. Hashem wants us to practice. He obligates us to practice. But think about the other side. Think about the other possibility. Think about a guy who's on a basketball team and he goes to every practice. He's really into it. And he's there and he works this really hard. The night of the big game comes and they're all getting ready. They're all, warm-ups. And the coach notices that, his star player is not there. He says, where are you? He calls him. He says, where the heck are you? He says, what do you mean? I come to all the practices. Okay, I had something else important to do tonight, so I'm not coming to the game. What's your problem? You're practicing in order for the real game. That's what today, that's what's happening today. For 2,000 years, we were sent into Galut, and Hashem said, you got to practice so that you won't forget when we come back home. And we finally have that opportunity to come back home and keep the mitzvot. And Jews are saying, no thanks, I don't want to play in the real game. I'm okay doing practice. That's a big problem. And that's another reason why we have to be so happy that we have Eretz Yisrael. We have the ability to come back and fulfill the mitzvot the way they're supposed to be kept. So many Rishonim, I told you, bring this. The Ramban, the next source. The Ramban uses this famously to explain how it is that Chazal say that all of the Avot HaKadoshim kept Kol Torah Kula even before it was given. On the other hand, Yaakov Avinu was married to two sisters, Rachel and Leah. Marrying two sisters is asur according to the Torah. So look at the Ramban answers, second to last source on the first page. It seems to me that this is our sage's opinion. Avram Avinu learned the entire Torah through Ruach HaKodesh, and he diligently studied it, the reasons for its mitzvot, and its secrets. In other words, he learned a lot of Torah. He also observed the entire Torah, but only voluntarily. He knew that he wasn't mechuyav, he was not yet commanded to do it. It was all voluntary. And he kept it only in the land of Israel. He understood that mitzvot are really only shayach in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore he only was makpid to keep mitzvot properly and to the T in Eretz Yisrael. And he goes on to say, Yaakov was married to two sisters only in Chutz La'aretz. We know that, right? Rachel died right when they got into Eretz Yisrael. The same is true of Amram, right? Amram, Moshe's father, Moshe was a product of incest. Do you know that? Moshe was married to his aunt. Amram was married to his aunt. You can't marry your aunt. And Moshe and Aaron and Miriam came from that, right? And nonetheless, that's okay. Why is it okay? Because, obviously it's okay because it was before Matan Torah. It wasn't yet Asur. But, what about the fact that our Avot kept the Torah before it was given? I'm sure Amram heard, from his father who heard from it's his grandfather, right? Yaakov is his grandfather. Why didn't he hear that you're supposed to keep Torah mitzvot? Here are the mitzvot. The answer is because he was in Chutz La'aretz. In Chutz La'aretz, they weren't so makpid on the mitzvot because they knew that it's only a practice. It's all over the place. But as I said, turn the page. Turn the page. It's in Mefurash Psukim. I found 4 Psukim in Sefer Devarim, in the beginning of Sefer Devarim, that say it explicitly that our mitzvot are only supposed to be, that the purpose of the mitzvah is only for Eretz Yisrael. Re'ei, limadati etchem chukim u'mishpatim kasher tzivani Hashem Elokai. Moshe says to Am Yisrael, listen Jews, I have taught you all these chukim and mishpatim like Hashem commanded me. La'asot kein b'kerev haaretz, to do them in Eretz Yisrael. Next pasuk. V'oti tziva b'eit hahilel lamed etchem. Hashem commanded me at that time to teach you chukim and mishpatim. La'asotchem otam ba'aretz, to do them in Eretz Yisrael. Next pasuk. V'ata po amodi madi v'adabra ilecha. Hashem says to Moshe, stay with me here on Har Sinai, and I'll speak to you at kol mitzvot v'chukim v'mishpatim asher talamdeim, because I want you to teach them. V'asu ba'aretz, so they can do it in the land. Asher ani noten lachem l'ishta. And the same thing with the 4th pasuk, over and over again. The Torah tells us, Moshe Rabbeinu tells us, right before the Jews are going to Eretz Yisrael, understand that the mitzvot that I've given you in these 40 years since we got the Torah are all for Eretz Yisrael. So, I'll end this part with one clincher. This source, I told you, there's at least 30 sources that say it, but this one is the best of them all. Because it's the one who you would least expect to say this. Look at the second to last source, Vayol Moshe, the last English source, okay? Vayol Moshe. Anyone know who wrote Vayol Moshe? Satmar Rebbe. Satmar Rebbe. Now, people mistakenly think, oh, the Satmar Rebbe, oh, he would never say anything good about Eretz Yisrael because he's an anti-Zionist. Well, that's a mistake. Because anti-Zionism doesn't mean anti-Eretz Yisrael. He was, in fact, he cared very much about the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael, so much so he felt that the secular Zionists are defiling the Kedusha of the land, and that's why he was so against it. Okay. But still, people don't think that they're going to hear something like this from the Satmar Rebbe. And look what he writes. It is a great privilege, beyond measure, for someone who is a perfect tzaddik and observes the entire Torah, not transgressing anything, God forbid, to live in Eretz Yisrael. Someone who's a real tzaddik, it's a tremendous mitzvah, a tremendous privilege to live in Eretz Yisrael. What does he mean? This is true even according to those poskim who hold that there is no mitzvah nowadays in the actual act of dwelling in Eretz Yisrael. Now, there is a machlokes as to whether the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael applies to Bizman Hazeh or doesn't apply. There's a whole chapter 13 here in this book, Drop in the Ocean. I'll describe it in a minute. All about all the sources on that topic, okay? And I call it a 90-10 machloket. There's the 90% of the poskim throughout the ages held that it was a mitzvah deoraisa. They all hold like the Ramban, who says that it's a mitzvah chiyuvit. It's actually an obligatory mitzvah. You must live in Eretz Yisrael if it's possible. Didn't mean you have to give up your life and try to get to Eretz Yisrael and then get killed on the way. That's clearly not. But if you can, it's an obligatory mitzvah. And there's around 10% of poskim throughout the generations who held that it was not a mitzvah. And the Satmar Rebbe is one of them. He holds it's not a mitzvah Bizman Hazeh. Okay? But that's what he's saying. He's saying, this is true. When I say that it's a tremendous privilege to live in Eretz Yisrael, that's even according to me, who holds that it's not a mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael. Why? After all, fourth line, every word of Torah that one learns and every mitzvah that one performs in Eretz Yisrael is much more significant many times over by virtue of the fact that he is in the holy place, Eretz Yisrael. Just being in Eretz Yisrael and keeping mitzvot, wow. Your mitzvah is so much greater than the same mitzvah you're doing in Chutz La'aretz. And then he goes on to say, this is why dwelling in Eretz Yisrael is equal to the entire Torah. We started with that source, right? The four Tanaim who were leaving Eretz Yisrael, they turned around, said it's equal to all the rest. He said, why is that so? For this reason. Even according to those who hold there is no mitzvah in the actual act of living here, he is repeating himself twice. He repeats the exact same thing. Because every word of Torah that one learns and every mitzvah that one performs there is much more significant. And here's a real clincher, even in our time, to say, oh yeah, of course. Everyone agrees that when the Beis HaMikdash existed, of course, before we were sent into Galut, of course it was greater to live in Eretz Yisrael, mitzvah were greater in Eretz Yisrael. But says Satmar Rebbe, even in our times, meaning even when there's this secular, I don't know, he uses some very harsh terms about Zionists, this shegitz, government, and this terrible, he calls it avi avodat tumah, the worst thing ever happened to Jewish people, according to him, is Zionism, okay? Even though they are the ones in control of Eretz Yisrael, it is still true that the mitzvah that you do in Eretz Yisrael are greater. And I already explained that in my humble opinion, everyone agrees with this. So here you have the Satmar Rebbe saying that in his opinion, there's no argument about that. Mitzvot are greater in Eretz Yisrael according to everybody. So therefore, Simcha Shel Mitzvah, we have an opportunity to come back to Eretz Yisrael. We should all be so happy and so joyous that today is the day. This is why we have the opportunity to be here and to fulfill this great mitzvah and to fulfill all of our mitzvot, to do all of our mitzvot. There's a source here, I don't have time to go through it, but it's the second one on the top, from the top of this page, where Moshe Rabbeinu, the Gemara and Soda, look at it on your own afterwards, where Moshe Rabbeinu himself says, I know I kept all these mitzvot while I was in the desert, but Hashem, please let me go into Eretz Yisrael, I just want to keep the mitzvot. I just want to do all the mitzvot again. I want to start over again. Which reminds me of the story that Rav Aaron Lichtenstein tells over that his Rebbe, Rav Hutner, who was my father was his driver, Tani's grandfather, Rav Yosef Lichtman. He was Rav Hutner's driver. So, and Rav Lichtenstein learned by Rav Hutner, okay? He had three Rebbeim. He considered Rav Hutner one of his greatest Rebbeim, and of course Rav Soloveitchik, who was his father-in-law and Rebbe, and also Rav Aaron Soloveitchik. But anyway, he says when Rav Hutner used to travel to Eretz Yisrael, when he would land, he would put on his tefillin again, even if he put it on in the plane. He already davened. It was way past Shacharis. He already davened on the plane. He would put it on again in Eretz Yisrael. And when asked why, he said, before this I put on Chutz La'aretz tefillin. Now I'm putting on Eretz Yisrael tefillin. The same exact tefillin! But now they're Eretz Yisrael tefillin because I'm keeping the mitzvah in Eretz Yisrael. That's why we should be happy. But there's one last point, and that is we started by saying that another reason why we should rejoice on this day is because of the Atchalut de Geula, the fact that we're living through very special times. I found a Gemara that basically connects that aspect of what I call the Simcha Shel Mitzvah, one of the reasons why we should celebrate our Yom Haatzmaut, the Geula. It also connects that to Simcha Shel Mitzvah. And read this with me. It's an amazing Gemara. Or it's really an amazing Rashi. Okay? Gemara in Brachot, Daf Lamed Aleph at the very bottom of the page. A person should not start davening, like Shmoneh Esrei. Davening, of course, in Chazal means Shmoneh Esrei. Not when he's sad. Below mitoch atzlut, not if he was just like being lazy, just like lying around. It's like, I'm supposed to just jump up and go into Shmoneh Esrei. That's bad. V'lo mitoch schok, or not if you're just sitting around joking around with your friends. V'lo mitoch sicha, or you're just having conversation, schmoozing. V'lo mitoch kalut rosh, or not if you're acting with levity. V'lo mitoch devarim betelim, or again speaking shtuyot. You don't go to Shmoneh Esrei right after you do any of those things. Ela mitoch simcha shel mitzvah. That's what we've been talking about the whole time. Simcha shel mitzvah. I was preparing this year. I said, I know that phrase comes up. And I remembered it was in the 5th parak of Brachot. Simcha shel mitzvah. So what does that mean? So what I should do is, right before I start Shmoneh Esrei, I should go out to the street, see if there's some old lady who needs to be crossed, right? Cross the street. I'll cross the street. It's a big mitzvah. I helped a fellow Jew. And now I'll run inside the base medrash and start Shmoneh Esrei. Is that what it means? We don't do that, right? No one does that. No one does a mitzvah, goes out to look for a mitzvah that makes him happy, and therefore goes into Shmoneh Esrei with on such a high. That's not what we do. What do we do? Shacharis, what do we do right before Shmoneh Esrei? We say Kriyat Shema u'Berchoteha, right? What do we do at Mincha? We say Ashrei. What do we do at Ma'ariv? We say Kriyat Shema u'Berchoteha, right? There's 2 brachot in the end instead of 1, right? Says Rashi, what is Simcha Shel Mitzvah? Ela mitoch Simcha Shel Mitzvah. Kigon Divrei Tanchumim Shel Torah. What is the definition of Simcha Shel Mitzvah? Tanchumim Shel Torah. Consolations of the Torah. The fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't abandon his people. That he redeems his people. You should say things that remind you that Hashem loves us and redeems us. That's the Simcha Shel Mitzvah that you're supposed to have right before you go into Shmoneh Esrei. And Rashi explains, Kigon, Samuch Legulat Mitzrayim. What do we do? Smichas Gula L'Tfilah. What's right before Shmoneh Esrei in the morning? Baruch Atah Hashem Gal Yisrael Hashem Svatay Tiftach. You're not allowed to have any kind of hefsek between Geula and Tefillah. Right? Even to bang and say, Yalav Yavo. Don't forget Yalav Yavo. You don't do that in Shacharis. Absolutely not. Never. You don't want to say a word or do anything between Gal Yisrael, Hashem Svatay Tiftach. Right? Because Gal Yisrael, Hashem redeemed us. Geula. Oh, Samuch L'Tihila David. And in Mincha, we say, Ashrei Tihila David. Shehu, what is Tihila David all about? Shu Shel Shevach V'Tanchumim. Again, it's praise of Hashem, and it's also consolations. Kigon. Ritzon Yirei Av Yaseh. Hashem does the desire of those who fear Him. Shomer Hashem et kol avav. God protects all those who love Him. Ukagon. Okay, that's Mincha. Now Ma'ariv. Ukagon mikraot hasturot betfilat Arvit. What do we say shortly before Shmoneh Esrei of Ma'ariv? Ki lo yitosh Hashem et amo. Hashem doesn't abandon His people. So therefore, the definition of Simcha Shel Mitzvah according to Rashi is Tanchumim Shel Torah. And that's what we're witnessing. We should be so joyous on Yom Haatzmaut that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that we have the zchus to live in a generation where so many of the signs of Geula are coming to pass because it shows Hashem's love for us. It shows that Hashem fulfills His promises. He promised so many years ago that He's going to redeem us, and He's doing it. He's clearly doing it. Anybody who doesn't see it, I told you, he's blind. He's blinded, and he should say v'tachazena inenu with more kavana, so he can open his eyes and see it. So, with all these things together, that to me is the greatest reason why we should celebrate, because of Simcha Shel Mitzvah. Now, of course, celebrating Yom Haatzmaut is very nice, but the ikar is showing Hashem in action that we really appreciate it. Because saying, even if you say Hallel with a bracha, without a bracha, doesn't matter on Yom Haatzmaut, but then, you go back to what I call your regularly scheduled lives and just, okay, but I'm going to college and, I'm going back to Chutzlar, it's going to go to college and, who knows, whatever. I have no intention, real clear intention to come back to Eretz Yisrael, then there's something wrong. There's something missing. Because the real way to show HaKadosh Baruch Hu how much you appreciate the gift that He gave us, the ability to keep the mitzvah this great mitzvah and all the mitzvah better, is to actually pick up and move and live here in Eretz Yisrael. And that's what I've dedicated the last 30 years of my life to doing, to producing works that enable students who are here for the year to not forget what they feel like. Because I'm sure that at this point of the year, you all have plans, have at least a desire to come and live in Eretz Yisrael if everything would work out, right? But then you get back, how many people, when I left my year in Israel, how many people were like, for sure, we're going to all live in Israel, no doubt about it, this is where we're going to be. Unfortunately, most of my friends did not make it. And it's because there wasn't anything to inspire us. I remember I wanted to be inspired, and I looked high and low, and I could only find two articles. One of them was what I read you from Rav Aryeh Kaplan. I would read that over and over again, the whole chapter of The Real Messiah, and another booklet. And it gave me tremendous inspiration, and I made it back, Baruch Hashem. But Baruch Hashem, nowadays you have a lot more sources. There's also other books out there, but I think that I've done my share in producing and making available some of the most classic svarim about Eretz Yisrael and about Medinat Yisrael. I'll start just quickly, go through them. Ema Banim Smecha is the number one, most important, my first work, and also the most important. Nothing even comes close. If you guys have not heard of Ema Banim Smecha, there's something wrong. But Rav Yisachar Shlomo Tachtal, this man was one of the Gedolei Hador in Europe prior to the Holocaust. He already wrote 3 volumes of Shelot Utshuvot. You know what that means? That means people were turning to him. He was a young man. Were turning to him with questions in halacha, because that's how Shelot Utshuvot are written. Someone asks you a question and you see, they keep on asking me questions, so I guess I'm gonna write down my answers and save them and write it in a book. So anyway, you can stop it because I'm just introducing my books.